The radio room was usually calm at this hour, with officers taking slow notes, checking frequencies, and sipping their evening tea. Nothing unusual ever happened around this time. But that night, something strange occurred. One of the radios crackled softly, almost like someone trying to breathe through static. At first, no one paid attention. It sounded like the normal noise that comes from old radio lines. The officer closest to it kept writing in his report, thinking it was just interference from weather. But then, the static changed. It became shaky, almost like a whisper hiding behind broken sounds. The officer frowned and leaned a little closer. Before he could reach for the radio, it suddenly went quiet. Completely silent. Not a single hum, not a single crackle. For a moment, everybody in the room paused and looked at each other. Silence was normal dead. Silence wasn't. Radios don't usually fall silent unless something cuts them off. The officer tapped the radio once, then twice, still silent. He checked the settings. Everything was fine. He turned the knob again, expecting a normal connection tone. But instead of sound, the only thing he heard was his own breath. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, a small voice broke through. A frightened voice. A child's voice. Hello, is anyone there? The room froze instantly. The officer felt his heartbeat jump. There was something in that voice, fear, confusion, and something even deeper, helplessness. He quickly bent forward, moved the microphone closer, and spoke gently. Yes, we can hear you. This is the station. Who is speaking? There's a long silence on the other end. Static filled the space again, making everyone lean in carefully. Finally, the little voice returned, shaking, almost breaking. Please, I need help. The officer nodded at his team, signaling them to trace the source. His voice softened. It's okay. We're here. Tell us what's wrong. The child breathed heavily, as if trying to gather courage. My parents aren't waking up. His voice cracked as he spoke the words. Everyone in the room felt a wave of concern run through them. The officer felt a tightness in his chest. Are you hurt? He asked quickly. No, the child replied. But they won't move. His tone made it clear he was trying to stay strong. But fear was overwhelming him. The team moved fast, checking the coordinates. But because the child was speaking through an old radio device, the signal was weak and scattered. The officer asked calmly, Can you tell me where you are? Anything you remember? The boy hesitated. I don't know exactly. We were driving. Then the car stopped. I shook them, but they didn't open their eyes. One of the officers whispered to the team, He must be somewhere remote. That's why he's using this old radio frequency. The officer speaking to the child kept his tone soft and steady. You're doing very well. Stay calm. We're trying to find you. Can you see anything around you? Any sign, light, road, sound? The child sniffed like he had cried earlier but was trying not to cry again. There's a small road. And trees. A lot of trees. And I see a broken board, but I can't read it. The officer took a deep breath. It's okay. Don't force yourself. Just stay with us. Another officer pointed to a rough location on the map. The signal was faint, but it was definitely coming from an area outside town, near an old forest route. The team quickly informed emergency services to start moving that way. The officer turned back to the microphone. Listen, you're not alone, okay? We're here with you. What is your name? The child replied softly, I'm just scared. He avoided giving his name, maybe because he didn't want to say too much. The officer didn't push him. That's all right. You don't have to tell me. Just tell me this. Are you inside the car or outside? The radio crackled again. Inside. I don't want to go out. It's dark. The officer smiled gently, even though the child couldn't see him. That's okay. You stay where you feel safe. Don't go anywhere. Help is coming. The child whispered, "Please come fast." The officer replied immediately, "We are, I promise." The boy breathed shakily. The officer could hear the loneliness in it, a kind of breath a child takes when he feels the world suddenly too big, too quiet, too frightening. "Is someone coming right now?" the boy asked. His voice held a mix of hope and fear. "Yes," the officer said firmly. "A team is already on the way. Just keep talking to me. You're doing great." The child tried to steady his voice. "Okay, but it's very cold." The officer responded, "Do you have a jacket or blanket?" "There's a jacket," the boy said softly. "It's my dad's. Wear it," the officer said gently. "It will help you stay warm." After a few seconds, the boy said, "Okay, I'm wearing it." The officer glanced at the team. "How long?" he whispered. One of them replied, "They're about 15 minutes away." The officer nodded and spoke back into the mic. "You're being very brave. Just keep talking. We won't leave you alone." The boy breathed in slowly. "Thank you." His voice was small, but that one word carried hope. The officer kept listening, making sure the child didn't feel abandoned, while the rescue team rushed toward the faint signal that came from a silent road in the middle of nowhere. The officer kept the microphone close, speaking gently, making sure the boy never felt alone. The rescue team was already speeding down the dark road, their headlights cutting through the cold night. But for the child, those minutes felt endless. On the radio, the boy whispered again, "Are you sure someone is coming?" His voice carried that fragile hope that only a scared child can hold on to. "Yes," the officer answered softly. "They are very close now. You just keep talking to me, all right? Tell me, can you hear anything outside your car?" The radio crackled for a moment before the boy replied, "Just the wind and some leaves moving. It's so quiet." The officer nodded slowly, even though the boy couldn't see him. "Quiet can feel scary," he said, "but it also means everything around you is calm. Nothing is coming toward you. You're safe inside the car. And we're right here with you." There was a little pause. Then the boy said, "My hands are shaking. I don't know why." His voice sounded like he was trying to hide his fear. The officer leaned forward and spoke with the kind of warmth usually heard from a family member. "It's okay to shake. When you're scared, it just means your body wants help. And help is coming." The boy took a slow breath. I wish my parents would wake up. I keep checking." The officer swallowed, choosing his words carefully. "You're taking care of them. And you did the bravest thing by calling us." Another pause, this one longer. Then the boy said something the officer didn't expect. "I was asleep too. And when I woke up, everything was quiet. My mom was holding the wheel, but the car wasn't moving. I thought maybe she was resting. But she wouldn't answer. Then I checked my dad. He didn't move either. His breath trembled. I thought maybe the car just stopped. But then I got scared." The officer felt a weight settle in his chest. Not because of panic, but because he could imagine the boy sitting there, small and confused, trying to understand something far too big for his age. "You did the right thing," the officer said calmly. "You did exactly what a strong and caring person would do." The child whispered, "But what if I did something wrong? What if I made something worse?" The officer shook his head firmly, even though the boy couldn't see it. "No, you didn't do anything wrong. You're the reason we even know about this. You're helping your parents by staying calm and by talking to us." Static filled the line for a few seconds. Then the boy spoke even more quietly. "I didn't know how to use the radio. My dad used it before, when we went camping. He taught me a little. I just pressed what I remembered." The officer smiled softly. "And because you remembered, we're coming to you. That makes you very brave." The sirens were faint but growing louder in the distance. The officer could hear them through the small window of the radio room. He checked with the team. "They're close," someone behind him whispered. "Maybe a minute." The officer turned back to the radio. "Listen carefully," he told the child. "Do you hear anything outside now? Maybe a sound, something different?" The boy went quiet. For a few seconds, there was nothing but wind and radio crackles. Then suddenly, he gasped. "I hear something. I think it's a siren. Is that for me?" "Yes," the officer said gently. "That's for you. That's your help arriving." The boy let out a tiny sound, half relief, half disbelief. "They found me?" The officer nodded. "Yes, stay where you are. Don't get out of the car until they come close and call you. They will know your name because I'll tell them. They know a child is waiting inside." The boy's breathing changed. It wasn't steady yet, but it carried something new, hope. "I see lights," he whispered. "They're coming down the road." The officer felt the moment. He imagined the child in the dark, small headlights reflecting in his eyes, jacket wrapped around him. "Good," the officer said softly. "You'll hear them knock on the window or call out to you." There was a rustling sound on the boy's side, maybe him sitting up straighter. "Will they take care of my parents too?" he asked. The officer spoke with certainty. "Yes, they will check them right away. You don't have to do anything else now. You already helped them more than you know." Then, for the first time since the call began, the boy's voice sounded a little stronger. "Thank you for talking to me. I didn't want to be alone." "You were never alone," the officer replied. Through the radio, the boy whispered, "They're here. They're right outside." The officer could hear muffled voices and movement in the background, the sound of footsteps on gravel. A voice calling softly, "It's okay, we're here." The officer stayed on the line even though help had arrived. He didn't hang up. He stayed exactly where he was, listening, making sure the child felt safe until someone physically reached him. And as the rescue team reached the car and gently opened the door, the officer exhaled for the first time in many minutes. The boy wasn't alone anymore. The rescue team opened the car door gently, speaking softly so they wouldn't scare the child. The boy's small face peeked from behind the seat, his eyes wide and tired from fear. One of the rescuers knelt next to the open door and said, "It's okay. You're safe now." The boy hesitated, then slowly reached out his hand. The rescuer held it carefully, helping him step out of the cold car. The officer in the radio room listened to every sound, every breath, feeling the tension slowly melt from the child's voice. Outside, the wind brushed against the trees and faint lights from the ambulance flickered across the empty road. The boy held his jacket close to his chest as he looked around, unsure of what to say or do. One of the rescuers spoke gently. "We're going to check your parents now, all right? You can stand right here with me." The boy nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the car where his parents lay silent. He looked as if he wanted to run to them, wake them up, make everything normal again. But his feet didn't move. Maybe he was afraid of seeing something he didn't understand. Maybe he was just exhausted. One of the rescuers placed a blanket around his shoulders and guided him a few steps back to give space for the team to work. The boy's voice trembled as he whispered, "They will be okay." "Right?" The rescuer didn't answer too quickly. He knelt down to meet the boy's eyes. "We're going to do everything we can. You've helped more than you realize." The boy swallowed hard and nodded, though worry still sat heavy on his small face. Behind him, the team checked the car carefully. They spoke in low voices, too low for the boy to understand, but not low enough to hide the seriousness in their tone. They moved fast but with care, shining lights, checking breathing, and preparing to lift both adults onto stretchers. One of the rescuers called out, "We'll need space. Let's move them gently." The boy stepped forward, almost instinctively, but the rescuer beside him placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You stay here with me. They're in good hands." The boy hesitated. "But I was with them when they stopped moving." The rescuer nodded slowly. "And you stayed strong until help came. Let them take over now." The boy looked down at his shoes. "I kept talking so I wouldn't get scared." "That's exactly what brave people do," the rescuer said. The boy let out a shaky breath, and for the first time, he lifted his head and looked around, noticing where he really was. The road was narrow, surrounded by tall trees that blocked most of the moonlight. The air smelled of pine and cold night air. There were no other cars, no houses, no signs of life, except the glowing emergency lights. "How did you find me?" he asked softly. The rescuer smiled and pointed to the radio in the car. "You found us first." The boy blinked, as if he had never thought of it that way. "I just remembered my dad pressing those buttons once. And because of that," the rescuer said, "we're here now." One of the team members approached them. "We're moving your parents to the ambulance. Would you like to walk with us?" The boy looked uncertain, almost afraid to step closer, but then he slowly nodded. The rescuer offered his hand again, and the boy held it tightly as they walked toward the ambulance. The boy watched his parents being brought out carefully. Their faces looked peaceful, almost like they were sleeping, but the boy's fear didn't leave. He whispered, "They're still not waking up. Why?" The rescuer squeezed his hand gently. "Sometimes people need help from doctors. Sometimes the body doesn't listen right away. But now they're getting the help they need." The boy nodded even though he didn't fully understand. His mind was too young, and the night had been too long. When they reached the ambulance, another rescuer opened the door and helped the boy inside. The inside lights were warm and soft compared to the cold night. "You can sit here," the paramedic said. "We'll stay with you." The boy looked at his parents on the stretchers. He didn't know where to put his hands, so he held them together tightly on his lap. "Can I touch my mom's hand?" he asked quietly. "Yes," the paramedic said. "Just be gentle." The boy reached out and placed his small hand over his mother's fingers. Her hand felt cool, not cold, but not warm enough. He whispered, "Please wake up. We're going home, right?" The paramedic stepped aside to give him a moment. The boy looked at his father too, lying still but breathing with help. He didn't understand the medical details, but he understood they were alive. And that was enough to hold on to. The paramedic checked the monitors and then sat next to the boy. "We're going to take them to the hospital now. You'll ride with us. Someone from the station will follow behind." The boy looked up. "The man on the radio, is he coming too?" "He'll meet you at the hospital," the paramedic answered kindly. The boy nodded slowly. The fear in his eyes didn't disappear, but it softened now that he wasn't alone, now that adults he trusted were around him. As the ambulance doors closed and the engine started, the boy held his mother's hand again and whispered, "I didn't leave you. I stayed." And outside, the dark forest road finally grew quiet again. The ambulance drove through the dark road with its lights cutting through the night, but inside everything felt still. The boy sat quietly between the paramedic and the stretcher where his mother lay. He kept his small hand on hers, almost afraid to let go even for a second. The soft hum of the engine and the faint beeping of the medical monitor were the only sounds filling the space. The paramedic beside him watched him with gentle eyes, understanding that the silence wasn't comfort, it was fear trying to stay brave. The boy finally whispered, "Will they be okay?" His voice wasn't loud, but the worry inside it felt heavy. The paramedic took a deep breath before answering, "We're doing everything we can. The doctors will take over soon." The boy nodded, but his shoulders stayed tense, as if he was holding his breath inside. Outside the window, the roads changed from forest shadows to small streetlights. The boy didn't notice any of it. His eyes stayed on his parents watching. every small rise of their chests. They didn't talk to me, he said softly, as if speaking to himself. I kept calling them, but they didn't answer. The paramedic placed a warm hand on the boy's shoulder. Sometimes people don't wake up right away, but that doesn't mean they can't be helped. The boy looked up with tired eyes. I was scared, but I tried not to cry. I didn't want to make things worse. You didn't, the paramedic said. You made things better. If you didn't call, we wouldn't have found you. The boy blinked slowly. The man on the radio. He stayed with me. There was something in his voice, something grateful, something attached. The paramedic smiled softly. He's still listening. He will meet you soon. As they turned into the town, the ambulance lights reflected off windows and buildings. The boy looked out for the first time, as if remembering the world outside his fear. It looks different at night, he whispered. The paramedic nodded. It does. But you're almost at the hospital now. When the ambulance pulled into the emergency entrance, hospital staff rushed forward with calm but quick steps. The doors opened, letting in the sharp smell of antiseptic and the bright lights of the hospital corridor. A nurse reached for the boy's hand, but he stepped back for a moment, his instincts pulling him toward his parents instead. The paramedic spoke gently. They're taking your parents inside. You will come too. The boy nodded slowly, though his small feet hesitated as he walked forward. The hospital felt too big for someone his size. People moved quickly, voices calling instructions, machines beeping, doors opening and closing. Everything felt louder than the forest road, louder than the radio room. But somehow, the noise made the boy feel even more alone. A nurse guided him to a small waiting area near the emergency room. She placed a warm blanket around his shoulders and handed him a cup of water. Someone will come talk to you soon, she said softly. The boy sat down with the cup in his hands, not drinking it, not letting it go. He stared at the bright hallway, waiting for someone he recognized, waiting for a voice he trusted. His legs dangled off the chair, his feet not reaching the ground. He rubbed his hands together, trying to push away the cold that still clung to him. After a few minutes, the doors opened, and the officer from the radio station walked toward him. The boy's eyes widened with recognition. You're the one who talked to me, he said in a soft voice. The officer smiled gently and knelt beside him. Yes, I'm here now. The boy didn't realize how tightly he had been holding his breath until it came out in one long shaking exhale. The officer placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You did so well, he said. You kept calm, you stayed strong, and you helped your parents more than you know. The boy lowered his head. I was so scared. I thought no one would hear me. But I did, the officer said. And you didn't give up. The boy's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back the whole night. I didn't want to be alone, he whispered. You aren't alone, the officer replied gently. You're safe now, and your parents are getting the help they need. The boy quietly nodded, trying to believe those words. The officer sat beside him, not speaking too much, just staying close, giving the child the sense of safety he needed. Doctor walked toward them, holding a clipboard. The boy looked up quickly, his hands tightening around the cup. The doctor softened his expression as he stopped in front of them. They're stable, he said calmly. They're being treated and will know more soon. The boy breathed out shakily, relief slowly washing over him like warm water after a cold night. Can I see them? He asked. Not yet, the doctor said kindly, but soon. The boy nodded again, his eyes turning back to the officer. Will you stay here? He asked quietly. Yes, the officer said without hesitation. I'll stay as long as you need. The boy leaned slightly against him, finding comfort in the presence of the one voice that had guided him through the darkest moments of the night. For the first time since the call, He felt a small, fragile sense of safety slowly returning. And in the bright hallway of the hospital, surrounded by strangers and machines, the boy realized he wasn't facing this night alone anymore. The boy sat quietly beside the officer, the blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. The hospital hallway felt too bright, too clean, almost unreal compared to the dark forest road he had just come from. Every few seconds he glanced toward the door where his parents had been taken, as if waiting for it to open by magic. His small hands kept tightening and loosening around the cup of water he still hadn't touched. The officer watched him with steady patience. He didn't rush him or ask too many questions. He understood that the boy was trying to make sense of a night that had suddenly changed everything. After a little while, the boy spoke in a soft voice. "Do you think they know I'm here?" His eyes stayed on the floor as he asked. The officer nodded gently. "They know you stayed with them. And they know you called for help. They'd be proud of you." The boy swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know what else to do. I just remembered the radio. I hoped someone would hear me." "And someone did," the officer said. "You didn't panic, you listened. You followed every step. That's something many adults can't do when they're scared." The boy blinked, his eyes heavy from exhaustion. "I just didn't want to lose them." The officer placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You didn't lose them." Before the boy could answer, a nurse approached with a gentle smile. "Would you like something warm to drink? Tea maybe? Or hot milk?" The boy shook his head softly. He wasn't hungry. He wasn't thirsty. His whole world was focused on one thing, the door behind which his parents lay. The nurse didn't push him. Instead, she set a warm drink on the small table beside him and left quietly. The officer looked at the cup and then at the boy. "You should try to drink a little," he said kindly. "Your body's tired." The boy finally lifted the cup. The warm steam brushed against his face. He took a small sip, almost out of politeness, then set the cup back down. "Everything feels strange," he said quietly. "Like I'm still in the car." "That's because your mind is tired," the officer replied. "You've been through a lot today." The boy looked up with tired eyes. "Are you going home after this?" The officer smiled faintly. "Not until I know you're okay." That answer seemed to soften something inside the boy. He shifted closer, as if the officer's presence made the bright, cold hospital a little less overwhelming. A moment later, the doctor from earlier returned, stepping carefully so he wouldn't startle the boy. "I have an update," he said. The boy's head shot up immediately, his small hands gripping the edges of his blanket. "They're responding to treatment," the doctor explained. "They were affected by something that made them very weak and caused them to lose consciousness. But they're stable and their condition is improving." The boy let out a long, shaky breath he had been holding inside for too long. "Stable. That means they're okay?" "It means they're recovering," the doctor replied with a kind nod. "It will take a little time, but they're in good hands." The boy closed his eyes for a moment, trying to hold on to the relief without crying. But a tear still slipped down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away with his sleeve. "Can I see them now?" The doctor hesitated. "Just one at a time, and only for a few minutes. They're still resting." The boy immediately stood up, almost too quickly after sitting for so long. His legs wobbled slightly, and the officer reached out to steady him. The doctor noticed the boy's eagerness and softened his voice. "Come, I'll take you." They walked down a quiet hallway, the officer following closely behind. The doors to the treatment rooms were lined with soft lights, and the air smelled faintly of medicine. When they reached one of the rooms, the doctor opened the door slowly, giving the boy time to prepare himself. Inside, his mother lay on a hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped at slow, steady intervals. She looked pale but peaceful, her breathing light. The room wasn't scary, it was calm. The boy took a small step inside and whispered, "Mom." The officer stayed by the door, letting the boy move at his own pace. The child approached the bed and gently touched his mother's hand. It felt warmer now, still not like before, but better than in the car. "I'm here," he whispered. "I didn't leave." Her fingers moved slightly, just enough for the boy to freeze and look up at the doctor. The doctor nodded. "She's responding. She can hear you." The boy's eyes filled again, but this time with relief instead of fear. He leaned closer and spoke softly. "Help came. I used Dad's radio. They found us." The officer watched the moment quietly, giving the boy something he had needed all night, a sense of reunion, even if small. After a few minutes, the doctor touched the boy's shoulder gently. "We should let her rest now. She needs strength." The boy nodded and slowly stepped back, giving his mother one last look before leaving the room. When he walked out, he turned to the officer and whispered, "She moved her hand." "I saw," the officer said. "She knew you were there." The boy wrapped the blanket tighter around himself and leaned slightly against the officer's arm. The weight he carried all night was finally beginning to lift. And for the first time since he made that desperate radio call, the boy allowed himself to believe that everything might truly be okay. The boy stepped out of the room slowly, still holding onto the warmth of his mother's faint hand movement. It felt like the first real sign that the night was finally changing into something softer, something safer. As he walked back into the hallway, the officer followed behind him, keeping a careful eye on the child's tired steps. The boy stopped near the waiting area and sat down, letting the blanket slide around him again. His body was tired, but his mind was still running. The officer sat beside him, close enough for comfort, but not too close to overwhelm him. "You did something very important in there," he said quietly. "Your voice helped her feel safe." The boy nodded slowly. "She heard me," he whispered. "Even though she didn't open her eyes, she heard me." "That's what matters," the officer replied. The boy looked toward the hallway where his father was being treated. "Can I see my dad too?" he asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. The officer turned as the doctor approached again, his expression calm and steady. "Yes," the doctor said. "He's resting like your mother. You can see him for a few minutes." The boy stood again, his legs still a little shaky, and followed the doctor. The officer walked beside him, matching his slow pace. When they entered the second room, the boy's eyes softened. His father looked almost the same as before, still, quiet, breathing slowly with the help of the medical equipment. The boy walked closer and touched his father's hand, just like he had done with his mother. The boy whispered, "Dad, it's me." His voice wavered a little, but he kept talking. "I stayed with you in the car. I didn't leave. I kept calling. And they came. Everyone helped." He didn't expect a reply, but the doctor noticed a small flicker of movement under the man's eyelids. The boy gasped quietly. "Did he hear me?" "Yes," the doctor said with a gentle smile. "Even when people can't talk, they still hear familiar voices." The boy rested his forehead against the back of his father's hand for a moment, taking in the comfort of being close again. Then, after a few minutes, the doctor signaled softly that they should let him rest. The boy nodded and followed the officer back into the hallway. When they reached the waiting area again, the boy finally sat down with a long breath, like his body had been holding everything tightly and could now finally loosen. The officer sat with him, silent for a moment. Then he asked softly, "Do you want to talk about what happened tonight?" The boy looked down at his hands. "I don't know what to say." "You can tell me anything," the officer replied. The boy hesitated, then spoke in a quiet voice. "I woke up in the car. Everything was quiet, too quiet. I thought maybe we stopped to rest. But when I tried to talk to my mom, she didn't answer. I shook her shoulder. Then I called my dad. Nothing happened." His small hands moved nervously. I didn't know what to do. I was scared of the dark outside, but inside, it felt worse. The officer listened without interrupting, letting the boy share his story at his own pace. And then I remembered the radio, the boy continued. Dad always talked about how radios don't need phone signals. He said they can reach far. So I just pressed the buttons I remembered. I didn't think anyone would hear me. But we did, the officer said. Your voice reached exactly where it needed to. The boy nodded slowly. When you answered, I stopped feeling alone. The officer felt something tighten in his chest. You were never alone. The boy looked up with tired eyes. Can you stay here until they wake up? Yes, the officer said softly. I'll stay. A nurse approached and placed a small tray beside the boy. You should eat something, she said kindly. The boy looked at the food but didn't touch it. Maybe later, he whispered. The officer gently nudged the tray toward him. Why don't you try at least one bite? You've been awake for a long time. The boy hesitated, then slowly picked up a small piece of bread. He took a bite, and though he didn't finish, the officer could tell it was a step forward. After a while, the boy leaned back in the chair, his eyes growing heavy. His body finally began to slow down after hours of fear and adrenaline. The officer noticed the way his head began to tilt to one side. You can rest, the officer said softly. You don't have to keep your eyes open. The boy blinked. A few times. What if they wake up and I'm sleeping? I'll wake you, the officer promised. The boy looked at him for a long moment, searching for something: trust, safety, reassurance. Whatever he was searching for, he found it. He pulled the blanket up to his chin, curled his legs slightly, and finally let his eyes close. Within minutes, he was asleep. The officer adjusted the blanket around him and sat back, watching over him, the way he had watched over the radio earlier that night. The hallway grew quieter, the hospital lights dimmed, and the boy's breathing softened into the steady rhythm of exhausted sleep. And for the first time since the radio call, the night felt calm. The boy slept for a long time, curled under the blanket with the quiet rise and fall of his breath, filling the small waiting area. The officer stayed exactly where he promised, sitting beside him, watching over him like a quiet guardian through the final stretch of the long night. Nurses walked past softly, and every so often, a doctor would check the monitors inside the treatment rooms. But through it all, the boy slept, finally free from fear. When the morning light touched the hospital windows, the boy shifted in his sleep. His eyelids fluttered for a moment before he slowly opened them. For a second, he looked confused. He wasn't in the car, he wasn't alone, and the world didn't feel dark anymore. Then he saw the officer sitting beside him, exactly where he said he would be. The boy sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. You didn't leave, he whispered. I said I'd stay, the officer replied softly. The boy blinked at the bright hallway, now filled with soft morning light instead of sharp night shadows. It felt different, gentler, warmer, safer. Can I see them now? He asked. The officer smiled. Let's find out. A nurse walked toward them as if she already knew what he wanted. Good morning, she said kindly, bending down to his level. Your parents are awake. The boy's breath caught in his throat. Awake? Really? His eyes widened with a mixture of relief and disbelief. She nodded with a warm smile. Yes, they're asking for you. The boy's legs moved before his mind even caught up. He almost started running, but the officer gently slowed him down. Easy, he said softly. Let's walk. They followed the nurse down the hallway. Every step felt like a step toward a new beginning, away from the terror of the silent road and toward the soft safety of daylight. When they reached the door, the nurse opened it slowly. Inside, his parents lay in their beds, sitting up now, weak but awake. His mother looked toward the door first, and when she saw him, her eyes filled instantly with tears. His father's face softened into a tired but grateful smile. The boy didn't wait. He rushed inside, slipping between the two beds, holding onto both of their hands as if afraid that letting go would make the night return. His mother stroked his hair with a weak hand. "You're safe," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "You're safe, my brave boy." His father squeezed his hand gently. "We heard what you did." His voice broke a little. "You saved us." The boy shook his head quickly, eyes filling. "I didn't know what to do. I just remembered the radio. I just kept talking because I didn't want to be alone." His mother kissed the top of his head. "You weren't alone. You reached the right people." The officer stood quietly at the door, giving them space. The parents noticed him and nodded with deep gratitude. "Thank you," the father said, his voice steady though his eyes were emotional. "For hearing him." The officer stepped closer with a small smile. He made it very easy to hear him. He was brave. He followed instructions better than many grown-ups would in a moment like that. The boy looked at the officer with a soft, grateful expression. "You talked to me the whole time. I didn't feel alone anymore." "And you weren't," the officer said. A doctor soon entered the room with calm steps. "They're recovering well," he explained. "They'll need rest, but they're safe. And your son, he gave you both the time you needed." The boy stayed between the two beds, holding their hands tightly. His parents looked at him with a love that said more than words ever could. The night had been long, frightening, and silent, but the morning brought something else: clarity, relief, and a reminder of how strong one small voice can be. A little later, after the doctor finished explaining their recovery plan, the officer prepared to leave. The boy saw him near the door and quickly stood up. "Are you going now?" he asked in a soft voice. The officer nodded gently. "You're safe now. Your parents are awake. My part is done." The boy walked closer, the blanket still around his shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered, "for talking to me. For staying." The officer crouched to meet his eyes. "You did the hardest part. You stayed calm when it mattered most. That's something you should never forget." He touched the boy's shoulder lightly. "You saved your family." The boy looked down, shy but proud. "I just didn't want to lose them." "And you didn't," the officer replied, "because you didn't give up." The parents watched from their beds, their eyes filled with gratitude for the stranger who stayed, connected to their child in the darkest hour. When the officer finally walked out of the room, the boy followed him with his gaze until he disappeared down the hallway. Then he returned to his parents, climbing onto the small space between their beds, resting quietly between them. His mother stroked his cheek. "You were our light last night," she whispered. "Our brave little hero." The boy leaned against them, closing his eyes as morning sunlight warmed the room. The night was finally behind them. The silence was gone. And in its place was something stronger: connection, courage, and the simple, powerful truth that even the smallest voice can be heard when it matters most.